Today's guest is Grant McCracken, founder of DarkHorse. After a career in cybersecurity, Grant discovered that security doesn't need to be complicated and doesn't need to be expensive. So he set out to democratize access. DarkHorse is on a mission to make proactive and offensive cybersecurity accessible. Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to dive into the topic of cybersecurity. This seems like a very timely topic, too. The first thing that comes to mind is that Victor Hugo quote of "There's nothing in the world is so powerful as an idea whose time has come." And it just seems like right now, everything is pointing to this is a great space to be in. So talk to us a little bit about your passion for this space. What brought you about founding your own company?
Yeah, to double down on that quote, right? That's and why now? Because it's not acceptable to not have access to cybersecurity. And so if you look at smaller organizations like SMBs that just don't have a ton of budget, maybe they're just somebody that literally vibe coded an app, right? We saw this with T, actually, right? You're familiar with the app, right? Where I can't say like that they certainly vibe coded it, but like when you play fast and loose, you're not just playing fast and loose with like your little company, you're playing fast and loose with other people's sensitive information. And so every organization has a responsibility, not just to themselves, but to their users to ensure that they're secure. But the problem is, or if it costs you tens of thousands of dollars to do that, or it's like horribly onerous and takes months, or it's just complicated, you're not going to do it, right? Or you're less likely to do it, right? And what I've tried to do with DarkHorse is to remove all those sorts of barriers, right? We make it easy to use, we make it quick, we make it efficient. And as a function of that, it's also more affordable. As to why or what led to that, it's a confluence of all that, right? I delivered cybersecurity for 13 plus years. I've seen how much it costs. I built all the margin calculators, all this sort of stuff. And I saw an opportunity to provide access to these essential services to organizations that just don't have access to it right now. So am I making sense to answer your question?
Yeah, it does. We'll go a little bit deeper too, because I always think of cybersecurity as the same way my lawyer likes to describe his services of either you're going to pay now or you're going to pay more later. And it's not always top of mind until it is. So when you're dealing with customers who maybe aren't like, I'm just not thinking about this, or yeah, I'll get to that later. What's something you kind of wish everybody knew about the cybersecurity space and why they should be thinking about it sooner rather than later?
Sure. To again, double down on what you just said, there's a quote that I love that security is always excessive until it isn't, right? So it's always the cost center. It's always too much money. But I think that with the right reframe, it can actually be a point of differentiation, right? So like to those organizations that are like, I don't know about security, right? Point out where other organizations or maybe even the competition is not taking their data seriously. And people care about that, right? It actually means something because it's part of the zeitgeist right now, or things that people are thinking about when they're purchasing. If you have two equally priced products, or even you may even cost more, but you're more secure, or you're able to demonstrate that in some way, or demonstrate a commitment to security, that's a competitive point of differentiation. So it doesn't have to be this cost center. The second point that I'd often go to for organizations is you may tell me that we're not really thinking about security right now. And I'm not trying to be combative, but that's wrong because you are, right? So say, for instance, the second you built a login form, the second you segmented your users and said, this user has access to their information and this other user does not, you built security, right? Like all you're doing at this point is then validating those security controls, right? If you like engage with penetration testing or something like that, right? You're just but you're not like not doing security. You're doing security, like implicitly, you are defining parameters and you need to make sure that those are accurately enforced, right?
Yeah.
Those are just some of the conversations. And then obviously you can go down like the financial side of things and whatnot. And that's one thing that like, and again, not to get too far into the weeds, but that's one thing about like our organization as well, is that like if organizations really don't have the money, we're still able to help. Because we use like kind of a crowdsourced model, I've got penetration testers that are willing to work for free to help organizations, right? Because we just care about security, right? If somebody wants to be more secure, we're not going to sit there and be like, pay us or no. We're going to be like, okay, I'll give away my services. I'll give away the platform or whatever you need. If you want to be more secure, we want to help you become more secure. And so I think that's also, if we get super far down the conversation and it's just really
Yeah.
stuck on price, we don't care.
So I'm guessing as a kid, you weren't like, I want to be a cybersecurity expert. So what is it about your career and your path that really led you to democratizing cybersecurity? That's a big mission. That's a worthy goal. What led you down to wanting to do that?
I mean, for cybersecurity, right, just to answer that kind of question, like how did cybersecurity fit in? I've always been, I don't want to characterize myself as like a rebel because it's not the right term, but like there's like a curious mind, right? And that makes for really good hackers, at least in my view, where you're like, how does that work? And why does it work that way? And what happens if I tweak this thing? And what happens if I move that over here? And what happens if I poke this thing just a little bit more harder? And
Yeah.
it's that sort of curiosity that creates hackerness. And that's how I wound up in this space, right? I grew up building computers and then playing games. And then when you're playing games, you're trying to like increase the capability of your hardware. So you're like overclocking stuff. And so you're up in the voltage and you're trying to see what happens and then the system crashes, right? And that's not like hacking, but it is also hacking, right? You're like trying to do something with something that like maybe wasn't necessarily designed to operate within that spec. That's like just the natural sort of mental progression, but then also the democratizing, at some point you kind of want to give back a little, as it were. And so I wanted to create something that did good. It's stupid, but I have a bunch of, after this or maybe concurrent or some point, I also like just stupid things that, and again, not trying to go on too much of a tangent, but I don't know, maybe we could like have food with less sugar in it, right? And creating solutions on that front. Or I'd love to like kind of work on healthcare and try to figure out like what could we do to improve. Everybody's like acutely aware it's broken. Okay, so how do we solve that? Or maybe going into politics or something like that. So there's also like this, I don't want to call it philanthropic, right? It's probably more of a compulsive drive to just fix things. I think that's also just been like something that's helped in my career. I just see problems and I just want to go fix them. And I don't know, I'll stop talking. But those are like the mindsets that led to today.
So taking that mindset and that perspective of wanting to fix things, wanting to improve things, where do you want to take DarkHorse in the future? What is ultimately success? If you're going to be 5 years, 10 years down the road, looking back, what is success to you?
Great question. I'm going to caveat it by saying that anything I say is going to be wrong, right? Like that's just, if I know
I'm not asking you
is,
just to be clear, just saying, what would you consider success?
Yeah, I think success is just people using it, right? If people find it and use it and get value out of it, that's success, right? If organizations are more secure as a function of it, that's success. There's no real losing outcome to that conversation. Now, if we're talking about, if we want to go into more esoteric, like where also does this go? We're working on some like AI autonomous hacking stuff right now, or pen testing solutions. And there's a couple other players in the space that are working on stuff like that. But I think that in the next couple of years is going to be significantly disruptive for the industry and also organizations at scale, just because you're going to have agents that are going to be effective as hackers in ways that automation has just not been historically. And so I think that democratizing access to that's going to be an expensive solution, and trying to make that also accessible, and also just keeping up with whatever's next, right? We're not just going to have the platform and then it just helps the people with its status quo. We're just going to, it's always looking for, okay, so what's the next thing we could build? So there's potentially like attack surface management, compliance management. There's a lot of different things that organizations need help with. I'm actually giving a talk at GSX in a month and a half in New Orleans, where we're talking about like the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? And so as a small organization, again, because pen testing is just one component of your security posture. And so how should you be thinking about the whole thing? And how could we make that easier for organizations to have a holistic view on their security? There's the human security aspect, right? I don't know if we've talked about this before, but like 68% of the breaches start at the human layer. That's as per the Verizon data breach report. But so there's a lot of different opportunities to like help organizations become more secure. And it's just a question of where we think the most good is going to come from. So that's the loose answer. Again, everything I say is going to be proven patently wrong in the next 3 days, probably. So
That's part of being an innovator. So it comes with the territory. So
yeah.
you went from doing this work to then founding a company in this space. I'm sure in that founder journey, you've gotten a lot of really good advice and a lot of really bad advice. Does anything stand out as either really good or really bad that you can share with our audience?
Oh man. The first thing that comes to mind is and again, everybody has their own quirks or things that they resonate with, right? So you're more drawn to advice that matches what you already believe. Just a huge caveat to the fact that this isn't necessarily for everybody, but I've really liked Alex Hermosi. I'm not sure if you've seen his stuff online, but and so I'm not picking out any one piece of advice so much as like his mentality is just like show up and do the work. And just by showing up and just locking yourself in a room and focusing on something, you can get so much more done than a lot of people are just distracted perennially. And again, I know it because one, live it and have lived it in terms of just all the different things. And so when I'm able to really focus, right, the power of focus is just astronomical. You just disable notifications, hide your phone, just say, I'm going dark and I'm getting work done. And you're able to produce just outsized amounts of content. And I say content, it's not like content is in YouTube videos. It's content is code, it's whatever, right? Just so I think that just focus is a superpower and it's something that is a scarce resource in today's world. And so I have a reminder when I go into journal every morning to figure out what I need to do and think about. It's just do the work, right? You don't really, and again, not everybody's going to be at this stage, or like everybody, it's going to be different for everyone, but you don't always need more advice or to read another book, or sometimes all you need is to just sit down and do the work. And it can be tempting. You can just get stuck inside. And again, I'm talking to myself more than anything. You're just so we're clear. It's just sit down and do the work. And when you do that, you get some pretty good results. Hopefully that's useful.
Yeah,
And again, yeah.
That whole concept of just do it, just take the action. Like you had something right when the whole concept of just do it. I think the sitting down and doing the work, that's the hard part. Thinking about the idea and saying what if and let's explore and let's do this exercise, but actually getting down and rolling your sleeves up. And that's usually the difference between building something that the world needs and just thinking about something the world needs. And that's the hard part. On the flip side of it, of your founder journey, what's something that's really surprised you about starting your own company in this space? And you were like, you know what, this is awesome. I should have done this sooner.
Ooh, I don't know about the awesome part.
Still working on that one.
It's cool, right? It's enjoyable, and but it's my oh my is it challenging, right? So like it's like one of those things that I imagine. I don't have kids yet, but I imagine people are like, oh, it's a lot of work, and like you don't understand until you do it, right? And so this company thing is in that same boat where like you hear people talk about it's a lot of work. It's like you don't understand like how much work I thought it'd be and how much work it is are just it's crazy. But again, it's kind of one of those things you have to go through, and it's been a journey and experience. But it's probably the biggest thing is like how much I have to sell, right? I've never been a salesperson. I've always worked post sale. And again, and I feel so stupid saying this, but like I'm saying it just so that like other people hear me say it. Like I thought if I built something and something good and I put it out there, the world would be like, this is good, we will use it. And that is not the case. And you have to sell, and you have to learn how to sell. And it's a journey, and it's not necessarily fun, though it does have this weirdly addictive property to it, to where when you close the deal, you're like, oh yeah, let's go. And so it's again, it's highs, lows, it's everything in between, but it's a ton of work. And again, just to how much you have to sell. Even right now, for lack of a better term, I'm not like selling, but I am selling, right? In terms of I'm presenting awareness of myself and the organization. Like, I have to do this stuff. I have to go out and like just pursue all these different channels for lead generation. It's a whole ball game.
Part of being the leader, exactly. And if you do end up going down the kids front, I have 3 small kids. It's very much the same. Big highs. It's a lot of work, but then you have those big highs, like, this is amazing. Oh my goodness. I do a lot of comparison between parenting and leadership, because I think there are a lot of similarities.
We're expecting our first in March. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a
We're
whole
early
new
in the
ball
cycle.
game.
Yeah, so I'm also just double scared about just
all
compound
the
these two things on top of each other. And
it'll be good. Okay, I want to talk about one other thing and this is maybe a good thing to talk about in the season ahead, as you're going to have some changes there. But a lot of founders face that whole, it's work, it's a lot of selling, I'm always on. How do you balance that to avoid burnout? How do you balance that with having joy in the journey, embracing the good, the bad, and everything in between, having fun along the way? What do you do for yourself or for your company to make sure you're adding some levity to the situation?
one, don't take yourself too seriously, right? So I literally have a reminder every day that comes up that says it's all a game, right? You don't take yourself too serious. There was a book I read, and I wish I had the name, but it presented this concept of like red, yellow, and green zones, where you have, and you know it intuitively, you have like periods where you have like high degree of mental cognition, like medium, and then like you have your low, right? And so also just be like, if you're super aware of those things, you're like, I'm in a red zone right now. I'm not gonna write good code in this moment. So like I'm gonna go do something else. I'm gonna go for a run. I'm just gonna go play with the dog. I'm gonna go hang out with my wife. A lot of different like things, right? So like because there can be this like pressure to like, I have to constantly be producing and I have to like constantly be churning stuff out. But if you have that awareness that like and again, everybody knows it intuitively. I'm most productive for me personally, right? So I am most productive in the first 3 hours of my day. So when I wake up before my wife or anybody else, and I just try to sit down and I focus and no distractions, and I get so much done during that period of time. And then I know that I taper off, and then it comes back later in the day. And so like you structure your activities. But if I book a bunch of meetings in that morning period, sorry, I'm getting way too in the weeds here, but long story short, you know where your productive zones are. Don't try to just force yourself. And sometimes you have to, just so we're clear, right? So everything's a spectrum. Have some awareness.
Finding that flow state, what works for you. I 100% agree. When you're in the zone, you get so much more done than when you're not. And there's certain times where I'm just, this is not working right now. I could keep banging my head against this wall. Maybe I'll go for a walk instead. It's going to be a lot better later. So yeah, learning that about yourself, 100%, that makes a huge difference. One last thing I want to ask you before I tell people where they can find you. What would you tell your younger self before you're starting out on this founder journey? If you could give yourself one piece of advice to make that path a little bit easier, what would it be?
Challenge your assumptions is the very first thing that comes to mind. So like when I started building this, one of the things that I've changed my view on the most over the last, call it 12 months, is my view on AI, right? I had a we'll call it cynical view on AI when I started. And I was like, human pen testing is like going to be the future forever, whatever. And more recently, I've started to come around to the fact that actually so like maybe if I started this again, I would, if I had challenged some assumptions and been more in that headspace to be open to the fact that maybe this is going to be disrupted in more ways than I initially thought, I would have focused on the AI component earlier, which would have led to a different product, something else, right? We'd be like another 12 months ahead in terms of development or something like that. So that's probably the big one. Obviously, the other really big one is, and I didn't really have to do this as much because I sold these services before. And so I knew that they worked, but make sure that there's a product market fit for what you're doing. I've seen a lot of organizations, and again, even myself to an extent here, just so we're clear, where, you know, you go build something and it turns out nobody actually wanted that. And you're like, shoot, like I really thought that people would want this feature and use it in the way that I thought they would use it, and nobody gives a hoot. And those are two super essential things, right? Because if you're not sure that you've got good product market fit, you're potentially going to spend a lot of time building something that you may not actually find users for. But then you have to juxtapose that against relentless founder conviction, right? They're wrong and I'm right. And you're thinking like Reed Hastings in like early days of Netflix, where you're thinking like 60 moves ahead, but but again, you still had to have a viable model in the beginning. Yeah.
Far enough ahead, you can be out front, not so far that you lose your customers on the way.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
If people want to find more about you, about DarkHorse, where can they find more?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So Grant McCracken. There's a couple other Grant McCrackens on there. So if you put Grant McCracken Security, Grant McCracken DarkHorse, probably should be able to find me. And then my email is grant@darkhorse.sh. Obviously, darkhorse.sh is also where DarkHorse is located. Yeah, if you've got anything security related that you'd help with, or if there's anything we can do, even if you're not able to really pay a bunch of money for it, we'd love to help. That's our mission.
Love that. Making cybersecurity accessible. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.